How you guys doing? Oh, that was loud. Appreciate you still hanging around for the last session. I'm Eric, honored to share the stage with PJ, Rob, and Sean. So we're going to talk about what it takes to build something that's truly iconic, especially when it comes to brand partnerships. So let's start with why F1 is such a powerful stage for storytelling. Rob, I know when we talked, you mentioned that, F1's not a sport, it's a cultural phenomenon. So what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, well, first and foremost, good afternoon. Thank you so much for having us. And don't worry, it is drinks after this session. It's not far away now. Look, think about it at the broader context. There is so much choice out there right now. People are discovering and uncovering so much different variety out there in the world, and brands are getting better and better at the way that they present themselves out there into the world. And then consider, that Formula One is 75 years old. Aston Martin as a brand is 112 years old. And yet, what's remarkable is the fact that people are now still discovering Formula One and Aston Martin, and that the sport is attracting so many new people into the sport, even now, even against the context and the backdrop of so much variety and choice out there in the world. And when we talk about people coming into Aston Martin and into the sport, particularly in the States, it's a newer, younger fan that is skewing more female, which is fantastic, where, traditionally sports are skewing more male. So that's great to see. And it's in turn attracting brands like Elemis into the sport. And then if you combine that with Aston Martin, which in itself is ultimately about a lifestyle brand, the way that we've come into the sport is to really capitalize on these newer, younger fans and the fact that people are now discovering the sport through, I guess, more emotional connections. It's not just about the tech or the innovation. It's now about Drive to Survive. It's about TikTok. It's about brilliant editorial where you get to connect with people. So you've got this kind of perfect storm coming together of the sport, which is bringing in newer audiences. You've got Aston Martin as a luxury lifestyle brand, and you've got a real desire now for stories and human stories. And as a new team in the sport still, we're still only 4 years old in Formula One. We really want to tap into that audience and that moment and create things like brand collaborations where we had with Rolling Stones last week, and we're doing something with Dom Dollar tomorrow night in Wynwood. This is a completely new era for the sport, and we want to be right at the front of that agenda where we turn up and we are part of the cultural movement and we are part of everyday life, not just a racing team.
Yeah, I think one thing to harp on there, I think you said like 40% of the audience is female, which is something that I think is overlooked oftentimes, and great opportunity for a lot of brands that just think, oh, sports, that's male audience, but it's really not the case. PJ, when we talked, you mentioned that Aston Martin doesn't like to do any one and done partnerships. So how do you make that happen up front and prepare and make sure that when you set something up that it's going to be lasting?
Yeah, so we're quite fortunate that when we go into a brand partnership, we kind of align with our own brand pillars and then our partners' brand pillars and find those synergies. And from there, we don't do sort of the one and dones, as you say, in terms of or brand slapping. The way that we sort of look at it and work with our partners is really from the outset. So, we go through quite an intense brand and design immersion, where we bring all the relevant stakeholders in with a new partner. We go through an onboarding process. We're really lucky and fortunate that we set those relationships out from the get-go. And what we tend to find is this magic starts to happen for us. And we sort of almost plot out and sort of an evolution of the partnership. So typically when we onboard, we kind of like no less than 3 years with a partnership. And when we do those agreements, it's because we want to go on that journey. And what we tend to find is when we bring the design teams together between two different brands and ourselves, we sort of start learning from each other. So we have partners where we've worked with them in a design respect, and they've given us new materials and new ideas to put into our products. But likewise, we've then learned from them, and we've learned on how we can improve our products. And again, we push these boundaries constantly, and we do very unique things that no one does see or has done before, and we're incredibly proud of those partnerships when we do them.
Awesome. Can you speak about a few of the ones that we connected on and
Yeah,
what makes
yeah.
them so special and how they really align with Aston Martin's pillars?
Yeah, so we've got a number of lifestyle partners that we've worked with in the past, and we've got if I start with Kargo, who is our official watch partner. We have been in that partnership for about 5 years now, and when we first brought out the very first product, it was a bit of a test and learn, and we just put the wings on the back and we sort of looked at our color palettes and the materiality, but that was really just a very light touch. Fast forward to some of the things that we've then brought out from a product perspective, and we really pushed them. I don't know if they're quite over it yet, but we did push them really hard with a new ceramic bracelet. And we did the green ceramic, and we went into our iconic Aston Martin green and really said, do you think you could achieve this? Now, other brands in the watch sector, black, red, white, that's a really, because of the way you make ceramic, that's really easy to achieve. Dark green is incredibly difficult because of the temperatures involved with that. But, we achieved it, and we had this incredibly iconic watch, limited edition run that happened with it, that sold out within about the first 3 months of launch, which, was really quite something. Fast forward again to, we built up this trust from working with their design team. And, if you're in the watch industry, it's very intricate. There's a lot goes into movement of a watch. And we actually, they very graciously let our design team change the design and the movement within the watch face. So we actually had an impact on the bridge mechanism within the watch. Now, that hadn't really been done before from an automotive and watch partnership. So that was really special in the respect of the evolution, and again, pushing those boundaries and having something that was incredibly successful and iconic. So it's that kind of trust that builds between two partners that then starts this storytelling happening. And it's something that, we absolutely adore, and we do it across all of our partners.
It's amazing. You should look up the watch too. It's gorgeous. I wish we had a visual. Sean, I think one thing I wanted to chat with you about is that at the surface level, skincare and racing maybe don't go together quite like peanut butter and jelly. So when you first, I guess, explored this partnership, did you get internal pushback, or what kind of put you over the edge to say, this makes sense, it aligns with our brand, and we want to do this?
Yeah, look, it was an interesting announcement to my executive team that we were about to sign a partnership with a Formula One team. I think the Aston Martin connection definitely helped, being an iconic British brand, and Elemis, I started 35 years ago with 2 other co-founders. We sell our products worldwide through spas and through beauty distribution, but to be associated with such a brand as Aston Martin obviously has its obvious advantages, its heritage, its legacy, its performance. The negatives that I got hit with, of course, were, we just were a B Corp company, certified, sustainability, CSR. We're really going to go and burn up fuel around the world, burning around a racetrack. Are we crazy? And with a load of petrol heads. And the reality is far from that, so far from it. In fact, when I look at the sustainability charters of Aston Martin, Aramco, they're far more advanced than many other companies anywhere in the world. Their objectives, their aims, and their commitments are far greater than any other companies actually we've ever been involved with. So B Corp actually were thrilled that we would get involved. So the certified body that operates that were really engaged on the opportunity, number one. Number two, I've seen some of the topics today, Formula One as a movement, as a culture. It's more than just motor racing. This is something quite revolutionary. It's a phenomenon that's going on here. And the way that Aston Martin, Rob and the team at the F1 team, and also with the luxury car side, are embracing this opportunity as a platform to engage and to develop is quite remarkable. And I couldn't quite get my head around it at the beginning, because I originally was inspired by Lawrence Stroll's Beyond the Grid podcast, where he spoke to what it's going to take to create this success out of this brand. And he spoke to bringing together the best talent, giving them the best tools, and how he was going to ensure this journey would result in them winning as a team, as a business, in a sport, as a brand. And I found that inspiring, but that was some years ago. So after 35 years of running my company, I wanted a new energy. I wanted to find a new thread that would be game-changing for us. And we got it in abundance and more. We got so much more than we expected. And in fact, the biggest energizer and change up for us wasn't just the brand association, the obvious opportunity, but it was also the cultural change. Because we go to work every day trying to run a business as best as we can. We want to be the best version of ourselves. We want to achieve our goals, hit our budgets, and deliver our numbers and make sure we deliver our customer experience at the highest level. But Aston Martin Formula One go to work to win. And that really did change up into our world. So the meetings and the engagements we had suddenly became a lot more purposeful. And I found that their culture injected into our culture this whole thread of the desire to win. And that must be for other sports and other opportunities, but it was the surprise for me. It changed the game. So yeah, we have 99% female in our employee register. So we're a bit discriminatory against men. I apologize in advance. And I have to tell you, we now have, we have about 3,000 employees, and we have now 3,000 Aston Martin fans. It's amazing how they've embraced the partnership, but embraced that desire to win. And that's changed our game, so.
Yeah, it really is a culture more than a race. And if you've been to the race, or at Miami specifically, and I'm sure all around the world, there's a ton of pop-ups, experiential opportunities. You were telling me a couple of fun stories about what you've been able to do there. So can you share that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not going to take the credit. Amy here's the one that's coordinated all of this and made it all happen and brought it to life. But we have pit stop spas in their hospitality suite. And you know, credit where credit's due. I've been in most of these suites, and Aston Martin really are at the top of the game. I mean, look, we're in this Aston Martin residence sitting here, and you can tell the level of luxury and service and customer experience they promote. So we're coming with our best game, which is fantastic. But even, you know, doing facials and arm treatments and treatments at Formula One races, well, you know what? We had queues going out the door in Melbourne with the first one we did. The space we're being allocated is getting bigger and bigger, I'm very delighted to say. And even when we were in Melbourne, I had a request from a very famous movie star whose agent came in to ask me, could she please jump the queue and come into the Aston Martin suite from a competitor's suite for a facial, and could she please have a goodie bag? I mean, you know, you would not expect this at a Formula One race, and yet that is what this is all becoming, and that's what's happening. And we're being pushed to push the boundaries ourselves. So we're looking at new treatments, new ways of delivering an experience, new product collections, how to embrace the Formula One ethos of health and you know, really trying to bring a lot of that characteristics that the sport represents into our world. So it really has been an amazing partnership. And I think it's, forgive me for talking too much, but it's a key word. Because we're not just putting a name on a car or a name on a jersey. This is about partnering for a mutual objective. And that isn't sponsorship. That is really developing relationships to deliver clear objectives that help both parties achieve their goals. So it's a very different world.
Love that. I think there's a dynamic where a brand like Aston Martin has a level of exclusivity to it, but the sport and the team probably have a level of inclusivity. So how do you balance, I guess, PJ and both Rob, how do you balance those two dynamics and push forward?
Yeah, I mean, I get the question. It's a conventional question, but it's not a conventional answer because we're not a conventional team or brand. I think the question is, how do we balance it? And we don't. We don't balance inclusivity and exclusivity. What we set out on day one for this journey is, I guess, a guardrail and a real clear ambition to be the most inclusive, exclusive brand in world sport. And I think that was born out of where modern luxury is today, where I don't think you have choices and moments where you're being inclusive or you have moments where you're being exclusive. I think the way that you turn up and you show up is to generate moments of joy, to create amazing experiences, and to really pursue how people feel about the brand. And our objective on day one, 4 years ago, and it's still the same today, is that we want to really work on our brand image. What do people think about and feel about Aston Martin Formula One team? Now, we're a racing team first and foremost. We do drive cars around in circles on racetracks. But, when you go to that experience that we're creating in Wynwood tomorrow night and you see a private set with Dom Dollar, and that's free and open to our membership to sign up and come be part of that experience. Or if you buy a hoodie with Rolling Stones collab on it that we did last week in Carnaby Street in London, you're having the opportunity to be part of this brand of Aston Martin Formula One team. And that's what success looks like. And if you see the opportunities now in F1 to go out there and show up and be part of everyday life, that's what's special about Formula One. And that's where Aston Martin wants to play. Now, because we're Aston Martin, of course, our aesthetic, our style, the attention to detail, the drive and desire to do things the best we can possibly be. This is a brilliant example of that. That is absolutely in the DNA of everything that we do on the track and off the track. So that's where you get the exclusivity, or I guess the luxury coming through. But as I say, when we're focused on how people feel about us, and I think that's where modern luxury is today.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. I think F1 for us, with the race teams, an incredible opportunity to engage our fans and that kind of emotion that drives it. Our brand strapline is intensity driven, and everything we do has this emotion and this sort of, how does it feel from a sensation point of view? When you look at our vehicles and you get in an Aston Martin, it's the roar and the growl of the engine. Anyone who's ever had the opportunity to sit behind the wheel, you hit that start button and it roars to life, and it's the feeling and the love that you get from and the joy, and that then transcends down. And I think the interesting thing between sort of, where I look after the Aston Martin Lagonda partnerships is that we very much focus on extending the lifestyle aspect for our owners. And yes, there is still a fan element. Part of what we do is, we'll work with the likes of Lego and Hot Wheels, and we'll nurture that introduction to our brand. And obviously, I can't overlook the very iconic James Bond, as everyone knows, as most famously for. But then we move into how do we bring your Aston Martin into your everyday? And this is an amazing example. With the Miami residences, there are touch points throughout this whole building where we have taken the Aston Martin essence and design DNA that we use in our cars, the materiality we use, and we've just put them very subtly, very, very simply within the building. And again, we transcend that through all of our partnerships. And again, Bowers and Wilkins is a really good example for us, where they've come on board as our audio partner for in-car. And they take the tweeter technology from inside their stereos, and we have it. Our DBX 707 probably has one of the loudest sound systems known to man, because it's got 9 surround sound speakers in it, which is incredible. But we then are now working with them as part of the partnership to say, well, what does that look like outside of the car? What happens when you get out your car? So, we work with them to bring them into some of our real estate opportunities, and we're looking at how do we design that in-home sound experience. You've got it in your Aston, you get out your Aston, you go in and you explore, enjoy that emotion of listening to music inside the home. And we really kind of start building out this full lifestyle picture, which is kind of where, we kind of have all the pieces of the puzzle come together and work really well.
Love it. I had one other question that was, how do you kind of hyper localize these partnerships and activations, but I think you both spoke to that. As long as these partnerships and events embody the pillars of Aston Martin, like this Damdala event in Miami, that probably looks different in Australia or Dubai or Monaco, wherever the race is. But I guess, Sean, how do you approach that from a hyper localization standpoint when you're looking at partnerships?
I think, bringing it to a relevant environment for all the consumers and all of our audience, because I mean, we are quite proud of the fact that we're bringing in quite a new audience to the team and to Formula One. And that's one of the attributes we spoke to when we started this partnership, was what was capable. And the feedback and the engagement we've had through all our social, through all our media, has been remarkable. But with this week, we've just announced that we've extended the partnership. And this is where I'm loving working with Aston Martin Lagonda, Aston Martin Formula One, because they're pushing the boundaries. I mean, that's my point about winning, not just being the best version. You've got to get ahead. And we now have announced that we're partnering with Jessica Hawkins on her journey. And by bringing that to life through social media, through inspirational talks, our young female audience is just so excited about the prospect of what this can mean. Jessica's an amazing, inspiring woman. Her story is remarkable. I'm very fortunate. They've invited me for a hot lap tomorrow, so I'm absolutely terrified because I hear she was a James Bond stunt driver, and Rob looked at me and just started laughing, and Amy said, "Don't have much breakfast." But the reality to this is, she's actually giving talks to our staff. She's engaging with us on social. She's talking to our audience, talking through TikTok, talking through all the different medias, so that we can really find relevance and be inspiring for the younger audience. And that's what they're looking for. I mean, that's the opportunity as I see it. And that's how we localize. We come to where they're looking for interest, engagement, topics, and ways that they can, be relevant with such a legacy, beautiful brand, such as Aston Martin, such as Elemis.
I love that. I think that goes back to what you were talking about. The first, a kid's first introduction to Hot Wheels can be an Aston Martin. They build that loyalty from the jump, or the first skincare brand maybe in F1, right? There's a huge opportunity there. So I guess for all the brand marketers in the room, would love from each of you guys what advice you'd have on building iconic partnerships and really identifying, I know we already spoke a little bit about this, but what in a partnership at the core, I know you talked about really getting both design teams involved to build together. I've heard a lot of influencers talk about how they enjoy the power to, not just be given a brief and put in a box. So maybe that's part of it. But yeah, I guess back to the question, what as a brand should you focus on to make sure that your partnerships stand out and that you're not just brand slapping, as you said?
I think from our side, and the best advice, from being kind of heading up our partnerships the past few years, is just having a really honest and transparent conversation with your partner about anything, and even the difficult conversations, when you're maybe not quite gelling or there's something that's a sticking point, and just, having that face-to-face time and just saying, we want to make this work. We know it's going to be a success, but this just isn't quite clicking, and how do we resolve it? And it's one of the most strongest outcomes you can have with a partner, because you instantly have trust, where you both stand with each other. And ultimately, at the end of the day, you're partners for a reason. You've gone into this because there is some synergy. There's some, whether it's technical, whether it's performance related, whether it's the fact that you still, hand build or handcraft something, and you just have that shared passion to create something incredibly beautiful and desirable. And that ultimately is really what, for us, has been the true key to our partnership successes.
Well, I think, look, first of all, it's critical that you're always very true to your brands, and you're committed to your brand codes for what you represent, who you're looking to engage with. But that shouldn't stop you being innovative, creative, and really taking risk, because without that, you're not actually making any statement at all. And as Rob said earlier, there is so much noise today. And the speed and the pace of the media, the phones, the connection, I mean, it is very, very difficult to really find that answer to getting that consumer experience that enables you to find brand loyalists and develop brand loyalists into success. So for me, it's really about being committed, being true, but also taking risks, be innovative, be creative, and be adventurous, and find the right partners. Because when you do, push them to the limits and make sure you win. Simple.
I think, I've been in the sport for a while now, and the best partnerships that I've seen in Formula One are those that inject F1 right into the middle of their core brand objectives and strategies. The worst thing I think that you can do in a partnership is say, this is what we do from a brand strategy, our key brand campaigns, activations, and then our sports partnership exists over here. Put it right into the middle of it, because I think what's come through clearly today is that, we're not seeing ourselves just as a sports team. We've got an amazing story in the world of Formula One. It's one of the most exciting stories in world sport right now, what Aston Martin's doing in F1 and this winning journey. And, don't get me wrong, we are absolutely focused on winning and winning again in the sport. And that's an amazing story that we want to tell. But there is so much more to F1. It's one of the richest, most multi-layered properties in the world. And I think if you see immediately what Elemis are doing, the empowerment story being told through the lens of Jessica Hawkins, great example immediately into the partnership of leaning into the property with far more depth and real meaning and purpose to it. And we are really excited about and open for partners like Elemis coming in. Xerox at a school yesterday, visiting a load of kids and giving them access to Formula One. These are truly inspirational stories and moments that really demonstrate that you can put F1 right in the middle of your world. And we as Aston Martin and Formula One as a sport can deliver to help you on your brand objectives and business goals. And it's not a separate property. It can be right in the middle of what you're trying to achieve as an organization.
Amazing. I really love what you said about kind of having those uncomfortable conversations. And I've found too, whenever I have partnerships and we have an uncomfortable conversation, the partnership is strengthened greatly, right? So if you're willing to be comfortable getting uncomfortable, beautiful things can happen, especially when you're early stages. Don't be afraid to push back a little bit. I know we're getting kicked off the stage and everybody wants to drink, but any questions? Maybe time for one or two?
I think uncomfortable is an interesting question, because I think if you are too set on what is historically an association, I don't think you can move forward. We had a really interesting opportunity on day one to partner with TikTok. And you might think at face value, TikTok times Aston Martin, there's a rub and an inherent tension there. But the work that we're doing with TikTok on the platform, bringing creators into the sport, and my role as the CMO, I'm saying we are now a facilitator. Come in, create your stories, tell your stories in a real, authentic way for your audience, and give access to the millions of F1 fans on the platform. That is progressive, and that is pushing the sport and the team forward. If we are too set in our heritage and legacy and the way things used to be, then we're never going to progress and grow the sport and what we're trying to do. I will say, though, it comes with a caveat of we're never reckless with the brands. If we do have opportunities that aren't right for us because they don't make sense in the broadest kind of consideration, then we will move on. And we do have to make sure that we protect the Aston Martin brand.
Awesome. Thank you.